Chapter 1. When They Only Saw the Coffee Girl. I was the girl they called the coffee girl, the one they corrected in front of the entire board because of the wrong milk. But the morning I set his latte on the table, I found something they never meant for someone like me to see: two reports with two different truths. One cleaned for shareholders, one hiding a $14.3 million hole. I should have walked away, but then I heard my CEO whisper to the marketing director about inflating ad spend to bury the loss, and later I watched him order the IT team to delete the logs that proved it. They thought I was invisible, the quiet one who followed orders, but when Slide 7 lit up the boardroom with every secret they tried to erase, the same people who ignored me turned to see the girl they had dismissed standing at the center of their downfall, and that girl was me. I walked into the lobby of Finch and Bayworth just after 7, the way I had almost every weekday since the first week of January 2020. The glass walls still held the early Seattle fog, and the elevators hummed with that cold metallic sound I had come to know by heart. I had left Ohio the previous year with a degree in data analytics, and the kind of hope you only carry once in your 20s. I thought I would be solving supply chain problems and improving predictive models. Instead, I had become the girl who fetched lattes with oat milk and wiped down conference tables after meetings I was not important enough to attend. People did not mean to be cruel, I told myself. They were simply busy, and I was simply invisible. By year 5, I knew the rhythm of invisibility better than the rhythm of my own breath. The print room was my real office. The hallway outside the executive suite was my real workspace, and the coffee bar downstairs, where the barista knew my order before I opened my mouth, was the closest thing I had to a place where someone remembered my name. That morning began the way most of them did. Graham Boyd, the interim chief executive officer, had sent a message through his assistant that read in his clipped tone, "Bring up coffee before the board prep." He did not need to sign his name, because everyone in the building knew who wrote messages like that. I carried the tray carefully down the hall and pushed the door with my elbow. The room fell quiet, the way it always did when I entered. I placed his cup in front of him and tried to step away before he tested its temperature the way he always did. He lifted the lid, took one sip, and set it down harder than necessary. "The wrong milk again, Evelyn. We have been over this." His voice was low but sharp, and that small reprimand hung in the air. My cheeks warmed, but I nodded. I knew it was not the wrong milk. I had ordered what he always asked for. Sometimes the ritual of correcting me seemed more important to him than the drink itself. While I cleaned a small ring of spilled coffee from the table, I noticed Linda Cho, the chief financial officer, watching me with a thoughtful look. She had joined in 2022, and I had heard rumors that she was the kind of leader who noticed details too quickly. That day, she noticed me adjusting a number on a printed draft of the quarterly cost sheet that had been left on the table. A senior analyst had transposed figures in the freight variance column, and I recognized it instantly. My hand corrected it without thinking. When I looked up, Linda was still watching with the kind of curiosity that made me straighten my shoulders. I left the room as quietly as I had entered and headed to the print room to drop off some folders. The printer was spitting out page after page of Q2 budget summaries. A draft with a sticky note that said "internal" caught my eye. I shifted the stack to straighten it, and that was when I saw it. A second version of the same report buried underneath, labeled for shareholders. The numbers did not match. I flipped back and forth, slowly feeling my pulse climb. The internal sheet listed a deficit in operations that did not appear anywhere in the shareholder version. Freight and logistics had been smoothed over neatly, as if the loss had evaporated. I lifted my phone out of instinct. I had spent years watching things people assumed I did not understand. I snapped 2 photos, not for revenge, not for leverage. Only because something inside me whispered that truth needed a witness, even if she was a quiet one. I placed the pages back exactly where I had found them. As I turned the corner, I heard voices from the small side conference room. It was Graham and Jason Kroll, the marketing director. I froze for a second because their tones were sharp and hurried. Jason said something about escalating ad spend again, and Graham answered with a low, irritated reply. "If we inflate the marketing cost, it covers the operations loss through 422 to Q224. The numbers work as long as no one digs into the vendor contracts. My breath caught in my throat. $14.3 million. The number made sense now. The sudden spikes in campaign invoices, the additional spending that never aligned with actual deliverables. They were covering something deeper, and they were doing it confidently because they believed no one paid attention, especially not the one who delivered coffee in the mornings. I backed away slowly, hoping neither man had seen my reflection in the glass cabinet near the door. I walked quickly to the print room to finish what I had started. As I reached for the printer tray, a shadow crossed the doorway. Graham stepped inside. He was holding the internal budget draft and looking at me as if measuring something carefully. "Give me those pages." His tone was not loud but final. I held the pages out without a word. He took them and studied my face for a moment that lasted too long. "You should stay in your lane, Evelyn. Too many hands on the wrong papers causes confusion." It felt less like a warning and more like a promise. I swallowed and nodded. I had learned to respond with quiet neutrality, but inside something unfamiliar stirred. Not fear, not anger. Awareness. A sense that the ground beneath me had shifted and that my years of silence had finally led me to something undeniable. When he left the print room, I leaned against the counter, breathing slowly. I remembered the conversation I had overheard. The mismatched numbers, the two versions of the same truth. My hands tingled as if waking from a long sleep. I returned to my desk near the back corner of the operations floor. People passed by carrying laptops and urgent messages for real meetings about real decisions. I sat and opened a spreadsheet just to look busy. My mind replayed the pieces of the morning like a movie I had been dropped into without warning. Linda had seen me correct a number with the confidence of someone who understood the data more deeply than my role suggested. Graham had caught me with the documents that revealed the manipulation, and Jason had spoken openly about hiding the financial shortfall under inflated marketing costs. If any of them suspected that I had heard everything, I would already be sitting in human resources answering questions I did not want to answer. I stared out the window at the cranes across South Lake Union. 5 years of being underestimated had trained me to move invisibly. It had made me careful, precise, observant. People assumed invisibility meant insignificance. They forgot that the quiet ones sometimes saw the most. As the afternoon light faded, I gathered a few papers and walked to the hallway near the elevators. My steps felt heavier than usual, but also steadier, as if I finally understood something about my place in this building. I had been treated like a shadow, yet somehow I had walked straight into the center of a secret that could topple people far above my pay grade. I paused near the glass exit doors. Outside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of rain coming in from the bay. I could still hear Graham saying, "Stay in your lane." Evelyn. But for the first time since joining the company, I realized I was no longer standing in any lane he could control. I stepped outside, letting the air settle around me. I did not know yet what I would do with what I had seen. I only knew that once you recognize truth, you cannot unsee it. And once something inside you wakes up, it does not go back to sleep. I walked toward the streetlights, feeling the shift quietly settle in my chest. Something had changed in me that morning, and I could sense that it would not change back. Appreciate your support. Hit like, drop a comment, share with friends, and subscribe for more. Chapter 2. The Quiet One Who Saw Everything. I drove home that evening with my hands tight on the steering wheel, the Seattle sky hanging low with the kind of gray that felt almost metallic. I barely remembered the drive. My thoughts kept circling the two versions of the report, the conversation I had overheard, the warning in Graham Boyd's voice when he told me to stay in my lane. I went to bed late and slept lightly. When my alarm rang at 6 the next morning, I woke with the strange clarity of someone who has crossed an invisible line without meaning to. I arrived at Finch and Bayworth earlier than usual. The office lights were still warming up, and the hallway smelled faintly of fresh carpet cleaner. I sat at my desk and opened the system with the excuse of checking freight updates, but my real focus was the vendor list that had been bothering me for months. 5 duplicate vendor names, same mailing address in Tacoma, same bank routing number, 32 transactions that never lined up with the timelines of our campaigns. I clicked through each one carefully. Every red flag flashed like a warning that had been ignored too long. I whispered softly under my breath without meaning to. 14,300,000. I had known something was wrong. I had not known the scale. A quiet alert popped up on my screen while I was tracing a shipment code that did not exist. It was a message from Noah Hemsley. He never messaged anyone this early. Can you come to the server room before 8? Do not reply on chat. My pulse quickened. Noah was one of the few people in the company who treated me like an actual analyst. He was careful and private, the kind of person who locked his workstation even to walk 3 feet. If he said not to reply on chat, he meant it. I made sure no one was watching and slipped down the hall. The server room was dim and cold and humming with the low, steady sound of the units. Noah was standing next to a rack of blinking lights, his arms folded tight. Thanks for coming early. His voice was low and tense. Graham wants us to delete the system logs from May 2023. My stomach tightened. Why? He let out a breath. He says they are cluttering the archive. He sent the request yesterday. But I looked at the activity history. Someone accessed restricted financial logs after hours and tried to rewrite timestamps. It was sloppy. Whoever did it assumed no one would double-check. I could hear the unspoken words. Graham, Jason, someone high enough to think they were untouchable. I asked him quietly, "What are you doing with the logs?" "Keeping a copy." Maybe I am being paranoid, or maybe someone is trying to bury something big. I just thought you should know. I have seen you look at things nobody looks at. I trust your instincts. I nodded, grateful in a way I could not express. Thank you for telling me. Just be careful. He gave me a dry half smile. That is my entire job. I left the server room with my heart pounding in my throat. The fact that Noah was warning me meant this was not paranoia. It was real, and I was not the only one who could see it. By mid-morning, the office filled with chatter as people arrived. Tara stopped by my desk with the kind of expression that already told me something was wrong. She held a printed notice loosely in her hand. They cut my hours again. She slumped into the chair beside me. They said it is performance-related, but I have had 0 complaints from my leads. None. And when I asked for specifics, they said my role is not critical enough for full-time hours. I felt heat rise in my chest. Tara was one of the hardest working people in operations. This had nothing to do with her performance. I asked softly, "When did HR tell you?" 9:15. Rebecca said it was coming from upper management. She did not say his name, but I knew. Everyone knew. I reached out and squeezed her hand. "This is not your fault. Nothing about this is your fault." She shook her head, her voice cracking. I am so tired of being the one they blame every time numbers go wrong. I felt the weight of that sentence. It was exactly what I was afraid of. Pushing blame down to the lowest rung was the easiest way to hide gaps in the budget. Before I could say more, a notification popped onto my monitor. Appointment scheduled. HR meeting at 10:30. The sender was Rebecca Sloan. The room around me seemed to tighten. Tara's eyes widened. "Evelyn, what is that?" I stared at the screen. I knew. HR meetings without context were never good. Not in a company where power moved like shadows. I walked to HR at 10:28. Rebecca met me at the doorway. Her face was tense, her eyes avoiding mine until she finally spoke. "Evelyn, this is at the request of senior leadership. We need to review a few concerns regarding role alignment." Role alignment. The phrase tasted like a lie. We stepped into the small conference room. Graham was already there, sitting with his hands folded neatly as if he had been waiting for this moment. He did not smile. "Sit down, Evelyn." I sat, keeping my face neutral. Rebecca took the seat across from me, shuffling papers nervously. Graham leaned back. "I have noticed ongoing issues with boundary clarity. You have accessed documents not related to your role and created confusion across departments that cannot continue. We are recommending HR formalize a performance review to determine if your role remains a fit." My throat tightened, but I kept my voice level. I have performed every task assigned to me. I have not accessed anything outside of my permissions. Graham raised an eyebrow. Then how did certain documents end up in your hands this week? I opened my mouth but stopped. Anything I said could become ammunition. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably and cleared her throat. We can begin the preliminary file today if needed. The room felt suffocating. Graham watched me with a calm satisfaction, the kind of look that said he believed the game was already won. But the door opened, and everything in the room shifted. Linda stepped inside without knocking. She carried a thick folder under her arm, and her expression was controlled, deliberate. Sorry to interrupt. I need Evelyn for a review on the Q2 summaries. We are putting all performance assessments on hold until after the financial review. Graham stiffened. This is not the appropriate time. Linda met his eyes. It is exactly the appropriate time. We need the original drafts. Evelyn is familiar with them. The silence that followed was sharp. Graham pressed his lips together. Very well. If you believe it is necessary. He stood up and walked out of the room without another word. Rebecca exhaled in visible relief the moment he was gone. She rubbed her forehead. Evelyn, I am sorry. He has been pressuring us for weeks to document people who ask too many questions. You are not the only one he is targeting. I felt a chill despite the warm room. I asked quietly, why? She lowered her voice. He wants to clean house before the Q2 review goes to the board. I do not know what he is hiding, but I know he is afraid someone will find something. Please be careful. I nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me. After leaving HR, I followed Linda into her office. She closed the door behind us. I saw what happened this morning. Do not let him intimidate you. There is more going on than he wants anyone to know. She paused, then continued. If you ever notice anything unusual, bring it to me directly. My heart raced at the implication. I had noticed plenty, but I was not ready to reveal how much I knew. I said softly, thank you for stepping in. She gave a small nod. I need people I can trust right now. The rest of the day moved strangely. People whispered in corners. Meetings were rescheduled without explanation. Noah kept glancing toward the executive wing whenever he passed by. Tara tried to work through her frustration, but her eyes stayed red. Near 4:30, my computer chimed. A new email arrived. Sender, Margaret Bayworth. Subject, meeting request. Message, morning meeting, conference room A19. I want to speak with you. I stared at the screen for several seconds, unable to move. I had never spoken to the chair of the board. Most employees went entire careers without meeting her. I logged out slowly and gathered my things. The sky outside had shifted to its usual Seattle drizzle, and the parking lot glistened with thin puddles. I stepped into the mist, feeling its cool weight settle over me. The question circled my mind with every step toward my car. Why would someone like her want to speak to someone like me? The rain softened even more as I stood by my car door staring at the wet pavement. For 5 years I had been invisible. Now someone at the very top had turned their eyes toward me. I did not know whether to feel afraid or ready. Maybe I felt both. Appreciate your support. Hit like, drop a comment, share with friends, and subscribe for more. Chapter 3. The invitation I never expected. I hardly slept, and when morning came it felt too quiet, as if the city was holding its breath with me. I arrived at Finch and Bayworth earlier than usual, my shoes echoing in the empty hallway as I made my way toward the executive floor conference room. A 19 sat at the end of a glass corridor that overlooked the gray stretch of Elliott Bay. The door was already unlocked. Inside, the room looked nothing like the conference rooms I cleaned after board meetings. Dark walnut table, soft recessed lighting, artwork that probably cost more than a month of my salary, and sitting at the head of the table was Margaret Bayworth. She lifted her eyes the moment I stepped inside. Her presence filled the space even though she barely moved. She had the kind of posture that came from decades of carrying a company on her shoulders. Sit, Evelyn. Her voice was measured, not unfriendly, but far from warm. I took the seat across from her. My palms felt warm against the polished wood. She opened a folder in front of her. You sent a detailed variance analysis to the CFO last week. A very detailed analysis. She did not blink. Why? I felt my heartbeat in my throat. The numbers did not match. That is not what I asked. Her eyes narrowed. I asked why you sent it. I took a breath, steady and deliberate. Because I do the work even if it is not asked of me. And when something is wrong, I cannot pretend it is not. Her gaze stayed on my face long enough for me to force myself not to look away. You noticed discrepancies that senior analysts failed to notice. She tapped the folder once. Are you aware of how unusual that is? I shook my head. I only followed the data. She stood and walked to the side table where another folder waited. She handed it to me. Review this, she said. Take your time. I opened it. Budget sheets, forecast tables, freight cost breakdowns. At first glance, everything looked correct. But by the third line, I saw it. A repeated vendor entry with a decimal shifted ever so slightly. I pointed at it. This figure cannot be right, I said quietly. The unit rate does not match the contracted rate from January. Margaret nodded once. Correct? She sat again, folding her hands. That was a test. My breath caught for a moment. A test. Yes, I wanted to see how fast you would catch the error. I felt warmth spread across my chest. Not pride exactly, but something like confirmation. For years I had felt unseen, unheard, passed over. Now someone at the very top had given me a real piece of work, and I had not hesitated. Margaret leaned slightly forward. Tell me everything you have noticed regarding the Q2 budget. For a moment I hesitated, wondering if speaking openly would come back to hurt me. But her expression made it clear she was not playing for Graham's side. I chose honesty. There are two versions of the report, I began. The internal one shows a deficit in operations that the shareholder one does not. Marketing costs are duplicated under different vendor names. 5 vendors share the same address. Transactions began escalating in quarter 4/22 and spiked in quarter 1 and quarter 2/24. She did not interrupt. Her eyes stayed on me, reading not only my words but my certainty. I continued. I overheard Graham and Jason discussing inflating ad spend to hide the losses. Noah told me someone tried to rewrite system logs from last May, and HR is being pushed to reduce hours and open reviews on people who ask too many questions. I stopped, expecting her to question my access, my motives, maybe even accuse me of overstepping. Instead, she nodded slowly. Good, she said. That matches what I suspected. My breath released in a shaky exhale. She closed the folder in front of her. We have engaged external auditors. They will be reviewing everything over the next several days. Until then, you will not mention what you know to anyone, not even to your closest colleagues. I nodded. I understand. She stood. You may go. I left the room feeling both lighter and heavier at the same time. The hallway outside shimmered with pale morning light. I took a deep breath, trying to ground myself. I had just spoken freely with the chair of the board. She believed me. She trusted my eye. Linda was waiting near the elevator when I walked back onto the operations floor. She raised an eyebrow. You met with her. Yes. She stepped closer so no one would overhear. Listen carefully. The board hired independent auditors. They are already going through the logs and contracts. Keep everything you have seen to yourself. Not even HR knows what is coming. I frowned. What about Graham? Her jaw tightened. He knows something is shifting, but not how much. He is angry and dangerous when he feels cornered. I swallowed. What should I do? Nothing, she said softly. You already did enough. Now stay quiet and let things move. I nodded slowly and she squeezed my shoulder before walking away. The rest of the morning passed like smoke. I tried to work, but my eyes kept drifting to the executive wing where light filtered through the frosted glass. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach jerked. Near noon, an alert appeared across company email. Emergency staff meeting at 1:30. Mandatory attendance for operations, finance, IT, and HR. I felt a chill roll down my spine. This was it. Whatever Graham was planning, he was not finished. At 1:25, people poured into the large conference room. I walked in quietly and took the farthest seat in the last row. That alone told me this meeting was not meant to be fair. Graham entered a moment later, flanked by Jason and two senior managers. His suit was immaculate and his expression smug, the way it always was when he believed he had regained control. He stepped to the front of the room. "We have a serious issue regarding internal confidentiality," he began. "Certain employees have accessed documents outside their roles and created confusion across departments. We will be taking corrective action." People shifted uncomfortably. I felt my hands clench in my lap. He continued, voice smooth with false authority. "When trust is broken, leadership must act decisively. Some individuals do not understand the boundaries of their positions. We will be addressing these concerns immediately." A few eyes around the room darted toward me. Heat rose in my face. He went on. "Any attempt to undermine the integrity of this company will not be tolerated." Jason gave a small, approving nod beside him. I lowered my eyes. My pulse was loud in my ears. Graham was setting the stage to publicize whatever punishment he wanted to assign. Maybe suspension, maybe termination, maybe something more subtle but equally damaging. Then the door opened. Every head in the room turned. Margaret Bayworth entered with a calm that cut through the tension like a blade. She did not acknowledge Graham. She walked to the front and placed a folder on the table. Her voice was clear and steady. "We will be reviewing a different presentation today." Graham stiffened. "Margaret, this is a confidential internal matter." She looked at him as if he were a stranger interrupting her morning coffee. "I was not asking for permission." A hush fell over the room. Margaret turned her head slightly. "Bring up slide 7. No one moved, she repeated. "Now." Jason, pale and confused, fumbled for the laptop. The projector beeped softly, and then the screen lit up. Slide 7 appeared. It was the variance analysis I had sent, my exact formatting, my notations, my numbers. The entire room fell silent. I felt my breath stop. Graham's shoulders stiffened. His face drained of color, then flushed hot. His voice cracked. "This is not an authorized document." Margaret looked at him with absolute calm. "It is the correct one." Noah stepped forward from the side wall and plugged in a small device. New data populated the screen, confirming timelines, vendor duplications, and log access attempts. People stared. Whispers broke out softly. Graham opened his mouth, but no words came out. For the first time since I had joined Finch and Bayworth, he looked genuinely lost. I did not speak. I did not move. I simply watched, aware that everything was shifting in real time. The truth was no longer just in my head. It was lit up 10 feet wide on a screen the entire company could see. And I realized, sitting in the back row, that the moment I had been sensing was finally here. Appreciate your support. Hit like, drop a comment, share with friends, and subscribe for more. Chapter 4. The Truth That Lit Up the Boardroom. The room felt as if it had shifted onto a different axis, and before anyone could recover from the shock of slide 7 appearing, Margaret stepped forward with the calm certainty of someone who had already decided the outcome. She scanned the rows until her gaze landed on me. "Evelyn, come to the front." The words rippled through the room. Chairs shifted. People straightened. I stood slowly, aware of my own heartbeat, and walked past rows of colleagues who had barely acknowledged me for 5 years. Their eyes followed me now, some curious, some anxious, some stunned into silence. When I reached the front, Graham spoke first. "This is unnecessary," he snapped, his voice cracking under the strain of control. "She is not authorized to present financial summaries." Margaret turned her head slightly toward him. "She is now." Graham took a step forward. "She is a junior employee in operations. She does not have the context to interpret variance data. This confusion is exactly what I was addressing before you walked in." Margaret did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "Evelyn," she said, eyes still on Graham, "explain the discrepancy between the two versions of the Q2 reports." I drew a breath. The screen behind us glowed with my own analysis. This was not something I had ever imagined presenting in a room of executives whose names were printed on the building directory. I spoke anyway. The internal report shows an operations deficit that does not appear in the version prepared for shareholders. The discrepancy totals $14,300,000 across 5 vendor accounts. A low murmur spread across the room. Graham's jaw tightened. I continued, my voice steadier with each sentence. The 5 vendors share the same Tacoma address and the same routing number. None of them match legitimate contracted partners. 32 payments were made between Q422 and Q224. All of them were processed outside standard authorization windows. Someone whispered behind me. Someone else inhaled sharply. Graham tried again. These are complicated matters and require more context than she has. The data is being misinterpreted. Margaret looked directly at him. If that is true, you will have no objection to confirming the source of the log edits. He froze. Linda stepped forward then, holding a small remote in her hand. We will review the access logs, she said, her tone neutral but edged with steel. She clicked the remote. A video opened on the screen. Security footage from the server room, captured from an upper corner. The date displayed clearly along the bottom. May 12, 2023. The footage showed Graham standing beside Noah, pointing at a monitor. Graham's voice played through the speakers, slightly distorted but unmistakable. Delete the logs for this month. I do not want unnecessary noise in the system. My breath caught. The room erupted into whispers. Noah stood near the back wall now, silent, his face pale. Graham's voice boomed suddenly, louder than he intended. This is out of context. This is an internal discussion about storage capacity. Linda clicked a second recording. It showed the system interface, keystrokes, timestamps, edits labeled under Graham's credentials. Noah stepped forward. The deletions originated from the executive account, not from my team. His voice trembled slightly, but he did not back down. Jason, standing beside Graham, suddenly pointed at me. His voice cracked with panic. She has been manipulating the system for months. She has always been snooping. She probably forged those numbers to make us look bad. The accusation stung, not because it was believable, but because I recognized the desperation behind it. The beginning of collapse. Margaret raised her hand once. The room went silent. She looked at Jason with no expression at all. Your department submitted invoices totaling nearly double your approved budget. Can you explain that? Jason's mouth opened and closed. Marketing needed additional resources, high-priority campaigns. The agency partners assured us the spend was justified. Margaret's eyes did not waver. Which agency partners? Name any one of them. Jason hesitated. His voice thinned. The vendor list would have the details. The vendor list that routed hundreds of thousands of dollars to shell accounts, Linda added. Jason stepped backward. The panic was written across his face. This is not fair. She is framing us. She has always been too involved in things outside her job. Ask anyone. I spoke for the first time since the video ended. I never accessed anything I was not permitted to access. I only compared the reports that were printed and left in the open. The simplicity of the statement, spoken without anger, seemed to cut deeper than shouting ever could. A representative from the independent auditing firm stood then. He looked at a folder in his hands. Our team has reviewed the preliminary documents, he said. The irregularities began in late 2022. They appear intentional, not accidental. Graham turned toward him sharply. Your team is misinformed. I demand a complete review. You will have one, Margaret said, right after the board decides how to proceed. She stepped forward, resting both hands on the table. There is one more thing, she said. Evelyn was given a test yesterday, a report containing deliberate inaccuracies. All eyes turned toward me again. I felt heat rise at the back of my neck but kept my posture steady. She identified every error in less than 20 seconds. Another wave of whispers rippled across the room. Even the auditors exchanged glances. Graham sputtered. You are basing decisions on an unverified employee. She is not qualified. She is manipulating this entire situation. Margaret straightened. The truth is not determined by seniority. The truth is determined by evidence. Her voice chilled the room. She turned toward the board members seated against the far wall. It is time. The board members leaned in to confer quietly. The room held its breath. After a long moment, the lead board member spoke. We move to suspend Graham Boyd effective immediately pending full investigation. The words hit the air like a strike of lightning. And Jason Kroll will step down from all financial authorization responsibilities until further notice. Jason's face drained of color. Graham took a step forward as if trying to regain footing, but 2 security officers had already entered the room. They did not touch him. They did not need to. The message was clear. Graham spoke through clenched teeth. This is a mistake. Margaret faced him directly. No, it is a correction. Jason was asked to collect his belongings and exit first. He did not look at me when he left. Graham followed, shoulders stiff, jaw trembling with rage. The door shut behind him with a soft click that echoed louder than any slam. One by one, people filed out of the room. Some avoided my eyes. Some looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and newfound respect. Others simply stared, trying to understand how the quiet girl from the corner desk had become the axis on which the entire afternoon turned. Eventually, the room grew quiet. Chairs sat crooked. Papers were scattered. The projector still hummed with the faint outline of the last slide on the wall. Only 3 of us remained. Linda stood beside the table, arms crossed lightly, her expression softening now that the battle was over. Margaret stood near the window, watching the gray skyline of Seattle, her posture thoughtful. I stayed where I was, unsure whether to speak or wait. Margaret turned first. Evelyn, she said, her voice lower now, almost reflective. She walked back toward the table and stopped in front of me. Now we discuss your future. Chapter 5. When the coffee girl became the one who changed everything. I drew a slow breath as Margaret's words settled between us. The conference room was almost quiet now, the hum of the projector fading as someone outside finally switched it off. Linda took a step closer but waited, letting Margaret lead. She gestured toward one of the chairs. I sat, feeling a strange mixture of exhaustion and clarity, as if the events of the day had stretched me into someone slightly different from the woman who had walked into this room an hour earlier. Margaret spoke first. Her voice was calm, but held an edge of resolve. You have been doing the work of someone far above your pay grade for a long time, Evelyn. And you have been doing it without recognition, support, or protection that ends today. I blinked slowly, absorbing her words. Linda folded her arms in a way that looked more protective than defensive. You saw what the rest of us missed, she said, and you weren't even supposed to be in the room. She exhaled. That says something about your skill and your integrity. I hesitated. I never meant to cause chaos. Margaret shook her head. You did not. Chaos was already here. You simply refused to pretend you did not see it. Something in my chest loosened at those words. For so long I had carried the quiet shame of being underestimated, of being the girl who handed out coffee while hiding her degree behind stacks of papers no one asked her to analyze. Hearing someone acknowledge what I had held inside for years felt like inhaling clean air after being underwater too long. Margaret slid a folder toward me. We are restructuring the company in light of what has happened. We need someone who understands both the data and the culture here. Someone who will not be intimidated by titles. She paused. I want you to consider stepping into the role of Director of Operational Strategy. I stared at her. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. Linda smiled softly. You would report directly to me. Help rebuild everything Graham tried to bury. Create a transparent system that actually works. My throat tightened. I don't know what to say. Say yes when you are ready, Margaret replied. You have earned the right to think before you answer. They left the room together, leaving me alone with the city skyline stretching across the windows. I sat for a long moment, thinking about the 5 years I had spent trying to make myself small enough to survive. But now survival wasn't the goal anymore. Something else had taken its place, a desire to rebuild something in a way that helped everyone who had been overlooked, just like me. The next morning, the building felt different. The usual undercurrent of fear was gone, replaced by an unsettled but lighter energy. Whispers followed me down the hallway, but not with the same tone as before. This time there was curiosity, recognition. By noon, it was official. The company email went out. Interim Chief Executive Officer, Linda Cho. Head of Information Security, Noah Hemsley. Operational Restructuring Initiative to begin immediately. I sat at my desk, staring at the announcement until a familiar voice pulled me back. Tara stood in front of me, her face bright with cautious hope. "They gave me my hours back," she said, almost breathless. "Rebecca said the performance issue was a misunderstanding. She said things will be different now." Something inside me warmed. "You deserve that, Tara." She nodded, eyes welling. "Thank you. For whatever it is you did. People are talking, in a good way." A few moments later, Rebecca herself appeared. She looked tired but relieved. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I should have pushed back harder. He made everything feel like a threat." She swallowed. "Thank you for not letting him bury you. Or any of us." I gave her a small nod. There was nothing else that needed to be said. Later in the afternoon, Noah stopped by with a new badge clipped to his bag. "Looks like I have my own department now," he said with a sheepish grin. "Guess keeping copies of logs was not paranoia after all." I smiled. "I'm glad they finally see what you do." He leaned a shoulder against my cubicle wall. "They see what you do too. Took them long enough." The day moved quickly after that. Meetings shifted, teams reorganized. People talked in low but excited tones about the future. And everywhere I went, I could feel the ripple of something I had never felt in this building before: respect. Near the end of the day, I was reviewing a list of system changes when a soft tap landed on my desk. I looked up. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, stood there holding a cup of cappuccino. Her ID badge read Amber Reyes, someone from a new intake group I had seen only in passing. Her smile was warm but nervous. "I hope this isn't weird," she said. "But I heard what happened. Everyone has. And the girls on the second floor wanted me to say thank you for proving that quiet people are not weak." She placed the cup gently in front of me. "This is for your next meeting. They said you have one in 10 minutes. She paused. "We're proud of you, even if we barely know you." I stared at the cup, a simple cappuccino, the drink I had carried up and down these halls for years, always for someone else, always as a symbol of where I stood. Now someone was offering one to me. "Thank you," I said softly. She smiled again and walked away. I picked up the cup and held it for a moment, feeling its warmth seep into my hands. Suddenly the building around me felt new, even though nothing had changed except the way people looked at me, or maybe the way I looked at myself. I walked toward the executive wing, past desks where heads lifted in acknowledgement, past colleagues who no longer looked through me. And when I reached the glass doors of the meeting room, I caught a glimpse of my reflection. Same clothes, same face, but something steadier in the eyes. I stepped inside. Linda was already seated, reviewing documents. She glanced up with a smile that was both welcoming and relieved. "Ready to begin?" she asked. I nodded, placing the cappuccino on the polished table. "Yes," I said, "I am." The room grew quiet in the comfortable way rooms do when everyone inside knows they are building something new. The kind of quiet born from confidence, not fear. And for the first time since joining Finch and Bayworth, I felt entirely present in my own life. If you have ever been underestimated or pushed aside, remember this. Your worth is not defined by the role others assign you. And your silence is not weakness. It is the space where strength grows, waits, and eventually rises when the moment is right. If this story resonates with you, stay with the channel, share your thoughts, and let your voice be part of the stories we build together.